There are 3 steps that I use in my online coaching and online course for lower back pain to help people reduce their lower back pain. And in this tutorial, we're going to discover what they are and why they're important. And before we get there, we're just going to quickly recap what we talked about in the last video when we talked about understanding lower back pain. What we basically came up with is with a list of pain triggers and a list of what keeps us pain-free, and that's our list that we need to evaluate. So we're going to talk about that first, and then we're going to go into the 3 stages to help them reduce that lower back pain, which are test, measure, and then repeat. And I should say at this point, this is where most people have the most questions, because what they've been taught before is just to go straight into exercise, and they completely missed this part out. So they aren't reducing the lower back pain, they're just trying to build core strength or core stability on top of the pain, which in some respects is ineffective. Their core can get stronger, as many people have said to me. My core got stronger, but nothing happened to the pain. Now, some people may get lucky and that happens, but for most people, as I experience, and what they say to me is they tried this exercise program or this stretch or whatever it was, and the pain didn't get any better, but I got more flexible or I got more core strength or whatever it was. So to quickly recap the list that we came up with from part number 1 in understanding lower back pain is, number 1, you got pain whilst you were sitting. Now I must say at this point, this is a relatively basic explanation of it. I could go into much more detail, but it would take a long time and it can be quite drawn out as well, because we need to go through more questioning, so on and so forth. So I'm just going to keep it simple for the simple reason of explaining it. So, what are we evaluating? Well, what makes us painful when we sit down? Being in a flexed posture, and it comes on after about 15 minutes. Now, what keeps us pain-free? Standing up helps. Having a neutral posture through the lumbar spine and an abdominal brace. So that is the list that we are evaluating. So what we can now do is talk about the testing part. And the testing part is putting that into practice. So what does that mean? Well, if that comes out in your pain triggers and pain-free, what we do is we say, okay, you get pain after 15 minutes. So what we're going to do is we're only going to sit you down for 10-minute blocks. What we're then going to do is get you up, stand up, walk around, but just be out of that seated position. Then we're going to get you back sat down. What we're going to do whilst you're sat down is you're going to be up in the neutral posture and you're going to have a mild brace on the abdominals, because all of those postures, positions and loads have shown us that they reduce or eliminate the pain. So we're not just making stuff up and giving generic information. It's very much, we've shown in an assessment that when we go into a certain position and a certain posture, it creates the pain. When we then adapt that, it relieves the pain. So we can take that as an objective piece of information to say, well, if we do that, we will reduce the pain. What we've also understood is that it comes on after 15 minutes. So if we get up at 10 minutes, we shouldn't be in pain. If we then go and walk around, we can sit back down for another 10 minutes. So again, this is why it's specific to the individual. So that's what we're going to test. So we're going to test that routine. So a 10-minute sat down with a neutral spine and a mild brace. And then at 10 minutes, get up, walk around for 2 to 3 minutes, sit back down and do it for another 10 minutes. And if you can get through 2 blocks, we've just done 20 minutes of sitting without any pain. So what we then do is we then go on and measure it. And during my coaching, and what I would recommend for you guys if you do the online course and self-coach your way through, is to go for each of them for 7 to 14 days. Now with my coaching, I do it every 14 days. So I will send a follow-up in about a week. How are things going? How are you getting on? And then we'll book in the follow-up consultation in 2 weeks' time, in 14 days' time. So that's kind of what I recommend, how you would go about doing it. But with regards to measuring it, what are we measuring is, does the pain reduce whilst you're sat, or does it completely eliminate the pain whilst you're sat down, doing that routine? 10 minutes, then standing up, but whilst you're sat down, neutral spine, mild brace. So does that eliminate the pain? Can you then do it for a second time? So can you sit for longer without pain is essentially what we're looking for. Now, if that happens, okay, you've done it twice. Can you do it 3 times through? So a half an hour sat down. Can you do it 4 times through? So you're constantly just pushing that boundary. And what you're trying to do is find out what's working and what's not working. Because what you might find is, well, I can do 3 blocks of 10 minutes, and getting up, walking around. I can do that 3 times, but then in the 4th time, it comes on after about 5 minutes. So what we found is that we can get you from 15 minutes to being in pain to then doing essentially, 35 minutes before we get you in pain. So when we get to that point, what we then need to think is, now that we've measured that and we've got you to 35 minutes and we're just starting to get the pain on, we then need to go back into the testing part, come up with some more recommendations. So we go, in some respects, we kind of go back to the evaluation. So we're evaluating what's happened, and then we're going back through the testing and measuring part, which then comes on to the 3rd step, which is repeat. And step 3 can be as simple as what we've talked about so far. So it could be as simple as just keep repeating that 10-minute cycle and then walk around, 10-minute cycle, walk around. And then that builds us up. So that's a part of that sort of repeating phase. So we're testing it, we're measuring it, and we're repeating it. But what might happen is we get to a point where we then need to put in some other interventions. So what we could do to start with is, within each time that we get up and walk around, we could say, well, let's add in 2 hip stretches. Now, as long as we don't get any sciatic pain that comes with it, we might stretch the glutes. If you get sciatic pain, which goes into the buttocks and down the leg, don't stretch the glutes, or don't stretch the hamstrings. Anything that can stretch and irritate the sciatic nerves, we don't do that. If it is just back pain in the middle part of the back and potentially to left or right of it, it might be worth, well, let's stretch the hips. Because what we could do is we could say, well, maybe there's some tightness in the hips, so let's just test that. Let's just try that. How tight do the hips feel? Can we move the hips into X degrees of external rotation or internal rotation? If the hips are quite stiff, then we can say, well, let's start stretching them and see if that relieves any pressure on the lower back. So then what we do is we go back into that routine of sitting down, neutral posture, mild brace for 10 minutes, getting up, and then doing some walk around with a couple of stretches. Sit back down, repeat, so on and so forth. Keep doing that. Now, does that take us to, say, 4 repeats of 10 minutes without pain? Because again, if we've done that, we've gone past that 35-minute period. We could do 3, but we couldn't complete the 4th. Well, let's see if we can complete the 4th with a couple of stretches. If we've done that, again, we've tested, we've measured, and we've put in place something that's specific to the individual. What we can then do, which again is in the online course and a part of my online coaching, it's then starting to look at walking programs. If we can get people walking more, loosening up the hips, lubricating the hips, that's going to go a long way to helping with the stretches. So again, we may be able to do that in the morning before we sit down at the desk and do it. Does that help us go a little bit further with all the stuff that we've done so far? We could then also look at everyday movement. So how well are you lifting? How well are you carrying objects? Because what this is going to do, this is going to help us relieve pressure on certain joints. So it's going to help us relieve pressure on the lower back. It's going to help us optimize and use the hips that much more effectively. So when it comes to sitting down, the hips and the lower back are going to be in a much better place to be able to do that. So it's never a very sort of black and white, right, here's your exercise program, or here's your movements you need to go and do. There needs to be these steps of what we talked about in tutorial number 1, which is evaluate, which is an essential part of this stage. And I should mention, they aren't 3 definite stages, as you've probably discovered. They overlap each other. Evaluate comes into this one. And better understanding, because we gain understanding as we go. Very rarely do I sit with someone and someone gives me all the information there and then, because there's some stuff that they'll be doing something and go, oh yes, that creates pain as well, but I only realised that once I was doing the certain movement. So we don't do it, and it works. So once we've then gone through this stage and we've really drawn the lower back pain down and reduced it and potentially eliminated it, now we are in a place to go into exercise if we need it. Because at this point, it could be that exercise isn't needed. You've got adequate core strength and stability, you're just in pain, so we don't need to rebuild it. It might be that you're not interested in doing it, and if we don't need to do it, then why do it? Or it might be that it needs to become an essential part, so we need to add it in. But we can't know that until we've gone through these two stages, and that is what the online course and the online coaching is built on. It's not an exercise program that I just throw at you and say, right, go and do that and it will get better. It's about learning about your lower back pain, putting in the steps, the action steps, the advice, the recommendations that your body is telling you that it needs. So you go and do that. You have to listen to your body whilst going through test, measure, and repeat and evaluate. You have to listen to your body whilst you're doing it and build your new then advice on top of that. So hopefully that gives you an understanding. I could go on because there are so many potential variables that it could be, but I've tried to keep it as simple as possible. I hope it's been of some value to you and helpful to you. If you want to find out more about the online course and the online coaching, and if you want to enroll in it, just go to the links below, click either the online course or the online coaching, and I look forward to working with you in the future.